Hello and welcome to the Imagineer Podcast, your unofficial guide to all things Disney. I'm your host, Matthew Krull, and you're listening to episode 101 of the Imagineer Podcast. In today's episode, I have the honor of chatting with former Walt Disney Imagineer Tom K. Morris. Tom worked at Walt Disney Imagineering for over 35 years. He started with WED Enterprises back in 1980 with the development of Epcot, and he went on to develop and conceptualize ideas for countless classic attractions you know and love at Disneyland, Walt Disney World, and even Disneyland Paris and Hong Kong Disneyland. So in today's episode, I get the chance to chat with Tom about some of the projects that he brought to life and some of the things he loved about working at Walt Disney Imagineering, plus some of the people he got the chance to meet. And because of that, he's been working on a couple of new books, and we talk a bit about some of the projects he has in the works since he retired from Walt Disney Imagineering. At the end of the episode, I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about how you can connect with the Imagineer Podcast on all your favorite social media channels and how you can help to inspire and create the future of this show. So, grab some headphones, pull up your favorite armchair, and enjoy this episode of the Imagineer Podcast. When you think of iconic Imagineers, one name that undoubtedly comes to mind is former creative development executive Tom K. Morris. Tom worked at Walt Disney Imagineering from 1980 until 2016, helping to develop attractions like Journey into Imagination, Star Tours, Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland Paris, Cars Land at Disney California Adventure Park, and so many more. Tom also served as an executive producer for Hong Kong Disneyland, and he helped develop concepts for attractions like Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith and DisneyQuest. Beyond his role in Imagineering, Tom is also a lifelong Disney fan and a fellow Disney historian. So it is my great honor to welcome Tom K. Morris to the show. How are you, Tom?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Such a pleasure. I have been wanting to chat with you for a while, so it's great to finally get you on the show. And I even teased out to a few listeners that I was going to be chatting with you, and some sent in some questions that I'll ask along the way. But it's really great to chat with Imagineers who worked for the company for so long, and you have done so much. And like I said, not only are you have done a lot with Imagineering, but you're also a huge Disney fan yourself, and we're going to tap into that a little bit. But I wanted to start because with a question around really what you do, because with Walt Disney Imagineering, or I should say what you did, because with Walt Disney Imagineering, there are so many disciplines, and Imagineers I've spoken to have mentioned how there are sometimes, hundreds of different roles. So, I mean, we introduced you as being a creative development executive. So, how do you explain this position or what you did to someone who's unfamiliar with what a creative development executive does?
It's the hardest position to have to try to explain. When I started as an apprentice draftsman, it was pretty evident what it was I did. And I've had, several roles that were, a lot easier to explain. But basically, you're making decisions about, you're kind of making final decisions about the creative direction. I mean, you're hopefully setting an example or setting inspiration for the creative direction. But ultimately, more than actually producing any deliverable sketches or artwork, you're kind of conducting, like an orchestra, all sorts of different disciplines to make sure that not just my vision, but the company's vision, the team's vision, Imagineering's vision for what that project is. And so I personally get involved a lot with decision making about all sorts of things like graphics and color and music and not just the architecture not just the writing or the scripts. I'm involved in a little bit of all of it, and some of them I get more involved with than others, and I think that's probably true for all of the creative direction executives, and I have produced also as well. So I kind of done it all, but basically you're a conductor, and you're conducting the orchestra.
That's a great way to summarize it. I think that there are so many moving pieces with Imagineering, and it takes somebody to sort of steer the ship in the right direction. And it makes a lot of sense to equate that to composing, or to, I should say, conducting an orchestra, or being a coordinator for all the different talents and all the different parts of the full equation. And I mentioned in the beginning how you were a lifelong Disney fan and grew up going to Disneyland, back in the day. So what were some of the attractions or aspects of the park that captivated you growing up? Because I feel like a lot of the Imagineers have that passion or something that they gravitated towards when they were going to the parks when they were younger, that interested them.
Yeah, well, I've probably told this, story before, recently a couple of times, that we started going there when I was in a stroller, and our family would go there once a year in the summertime, usually on the 4th of July. And I just remember my first impressions were that it was not a kiddie park, that it was someplace that was more sophisticated than that. Because we would go to places like the Music Center that had just opened, to see like free Christmas concerts and things like that. And so our outings tended to be a little more, I won't say educational, but they certainly weren't, carnivals or things like that. I don't remember being taken to Knott's Berry Farm. I don't remember going there until, we took field trips in grade school to Knott's Berry Farm. So I just remember that it was a different kind of a place, that it just had this atmosphere that, and there were a lot of adults, there many more adults. I remember being there than people that were my age, thinking, I'm thinking now like 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. And so, Fantasyland, of course, was, colorful and very childlike. But the rest of the park seemed, there were exhibits that were kind of serious in Tomorrowland. And so it was just a very different kind of a place that, you would never refer to as an amusement park.
Yeah, it's true. It was definitely a theme park, just like the other parks as well. I mean, it's the same thing. I grew up going to Walt Disney World from the time I was in a stroller, and my favorite park when I was younger was Epcot. Especially back at that time, it was not like a very kiddie park at all. It was almost considered to be the adult park in Disney. But
yeah, that was the intention to some degree.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good segue. I want to maybe bounce back to Disneyland a bit, but because you worked at Epcot on a lot of the early attractions that were there, what was it like to design or to help to design parts of such an iconic park?
Well, it was exciting because I felt like, and I know a lot of other people felt like, we were doing something that was meaningful, that was even more meaningful than designing attractions for Disneyland or for Magic Kingdom, that it was somehow going to provide an example or a model, even if it wasn't the actual city that Walt envisioned, that it would be a place of ideas that would be, that would inspire others, inspire people, inspire communities, inspire nations. And, as it turned out, I think that was very true, especially when you listen to some of the folks, not even folks who went into Disney, but folks who went into other disciplines and became leaders in those areas, where they say that they were inspired to become an architect or an engineer because of Epcot.
Yeah, it's definitely an educational park in addition to being an entertaining park, and I could see how it would inspire a lot of people. I feel like if you if you go to Innoventions, you're probably thinking about, which unfortunately is not there anymore. But if you went to Innoventions, you probably were thinking and looking at all the creative ideas that were ahead and the technology that was to come, and feeling inspired for what you could possibly do with your own career and what ideas you could bring about. So I could definitely see that being the case.
It was a wonderful time to be, to be working there, because it was very optimistic and very, not that it isn't now, but it was, there was just an extra sense of forward kind of movement and thinking. And that was outside the typical themed entertainment realm.
Yeah, for sure. Very, very different park. To take a little bit of a step back, how did you end up getting a role with Imagineering?
Well, I sometimes kind of joke that I was drafted, which is kind of true, because at some point, I think in my junior or senior year of high school, is when I kind of decided, between many different things that I was interested in, that Imagineering would be the first place I would kind of go. And so I had already been working at Disneyland. And by the time I entered college, or the year that I entered college, coincided with the year that they announced Epcot, that it would be opening in 1982. And also around the same time, I think they announced Tokyo Disneyland. So at Disneyland, they, in addition to announcing that, they announced that they were initiating a career planning and placement, for lack of a better term, program. And they were seeking people's resumes and portfolios, because in the next 4 years, they'll be ramping up. Also, animation at the studio, I think, was kind of bundled in there too. And so the larger Walt Disney Productions was looking at Disneyland as being a resource for attracting talent, even at, entry level. And it wasn't just artistic and creative. It was everything. It was accounting and finance and planning and project management and all of that. And so they invited cast members to submit their resumes and portfolios, and they would be kept on file. And remember, this is 1978. So there's no internet. So these are hard files in file cabinets, And I thought, I wonder if anyone will ever look, right? Does it just go in the same file that every other, submission or application goes? So, but I submitted a resume and took photos of the art and of the drafting projects that I had done in high school. So most of what was in there was my first year of college and 3 years of drafting in high school, and a few illustrations I had done. And just hoping, it was really just to, like, the way I was thinking about it was, this is a placeholder. So when I graduate from college, they'll be familiar with me, perhaps. And so I was thinking 3 years ahead, not, a year ahead. So
right.
I got a call or a visit, I can't even remember now, from a headhunter, an internal headhunter named Stan Soa. There were two. Joel Trinist was one, and Stan Soa was the other. And they said, they need you at WED. They need architects and drafts people. And I said, well, I'm now in my second year at college, so I don't think I'm quite ready. As much as I'd love to drop what I'm doing, it probably wouldn't be prudent. And I knew Tony Baxter at the time, and I probably consulted with him, and he said, well, look, when by the time you graduate, that'll be like 1982, and they'll be finished with those projects. And who knows if there'll be a WED even, a WED Enterprises, after that. So, if I were you, I would get the experience now. And then if you need to go back to school, go back to school. So, okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Right.
So I interviewed with George Windrum, who was the head of the show set design department, and he hired me, and I started right away at the beginning, well, what would have been the beginning of my second semester in my second year of college. And I was hired on the strength of my drafting that I had done in high school. So all of the illustrations, that was kind of bonus stuff. The work that I was doing in college was, bonus material. They needed draftsmen, and they needed good draftsmen. And they could see that I had some imagination, because my drafting projects were not the typical, hospital or office building kind of thing. That's how I started. I took a pay drop because I was a ride operator, and I had been working at Disneyland for some time, first for a lessee that ran the balloon concession. And then as soon as I turned 18, I moved into operations. And the Teamsters, they were Teamsters at the time. I don't know what they are now, but it was part of that union. And they said that they had to they told Disney they have to put my pay back, or my hire date, retroactive to the balloons, which I don't know if Disney would have put me in operations if they had known that they would have had to do that. So I was making $6.80 an hour as a senior in high school, which wasn't too bad.
No, that's not bad at all.
Back then.
Yeah.
Back then. And I took a pay cut to then go to WED. So, but I wanted to get the experience.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely a good experience to get. And I would have done the same thing. If I could be able to work at WED, I would take a pay cut happily. And I know people would probably even do it for free if they had the opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
Imagineering, it from the Imagineers I've spoken to, I've always talked about it being a team sport. And there are so many, as we talked about earlier, there are so many different components to Imagineering. And I know that for Epcot in particular, there were a lot of Walt's original Imagineers who either were still working at WED or who had come back out of retirement. And I feel like, especially as someone who's just starting out, there's probably a lot to learn from some of those original Imagineers. Were there any in particular that you felt were great mentors, or people who you just, through working with them, gained a lot of knowledge and insight about what it's like to really be behind the doors at WED?
Yeah, I think it was something that you just kind of organically picked up, working, from time to time with the different folks, like, briefly with Mark Davis, briefly with Claude Coates. I can't remember if I actually ever worked with Rolly Crump, but they certainly all were there, and they would from time to time have, meet and greet sessions, I guess you'd call them. I think they were called designer enrichment. And you would listen to them talk about their, time at Disney. And so those were extremely valuable. And Herb Ryman would always come around. He was like like when Walt said he was a little bee, Herb Ryman was also a little bee, buzzing around. And so he always had some great suggestions, I should say, and insights. I was afraid to be too aggressive about, knocking on the door and sitting down and, asking them to regale me with, their time. Because I didn't want to seem like a fanboy.
Right.
That term was not even a term back then, but there was definitely kind of a thing that you didn't want to do that. I got that feeling right away, was that you didn't want to be a fanboy. And so I stayed low key about that. And, whenever, if we happened to be in a meeting or a lunch together, I would ask questions, but I wouldn't go out of my way to knock on their doors, which I regret now. I wish I had. And I think some of them would have been very open to it. And I think some of them would have been shocked and, looked at me like a crazy fanboy. Because, there was not a fan base for that back then. People didn't know what WED Imagineering was.
Right.
And so, there were maybe a few people who were, really excited about it. And some of them, were a little bit crazy maybe. And so, not crazy, but, overly zealous. And so maybe some of the older Imagineers had, some experience with that. And I don't know, I just didn't want to be the salivating fanboy. So, but I kind of regret it now, because now it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
To be, I mean, there are, people high up in the organization now that you could call fanboys or fan men or fan women. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's good to have that culture of being passionate about the company that you work for.
Right.
And I could only imagine if you had those conversations, who might have been the ones that were very welcoming to you being a huge fan, and then those who might have been a little more kept away about just wanting to get to their work and keep it focused on the professional side of things.
Right.
So that makes a lot of sense. You worked on so many projects, and just to get to a few of them, I mean, we could talk for hours about all of them, but just to highlight a few of them, one of them that jumping a little farther ahead, kind of skipping around, but for the decades a little bit, is working on Disneyland Paris, and in particular the Sleeping Beauty Castle, which a lot of Disney fans, myself included, consider to be probably the most beautiful castle at any Disney park. I think maybe the only one to potentially rival it now might be, since they changed Hong Kong Disneyland, which looks incredible too. But Disneyland Paris, I mean, that castle is just magnificent. It's gorgeous. And having seen it in person, it's a beautiful castle. What is it like what was it like, I should say, to design a Disney castle? And did it feel different than designing an attraction, to design something that really is like an icon of the park?
Well, it didn't feel different than designing an attraction, because I guess I considered it an attraction because it had so many components.
True.
To it, in addition to a couple of shops that had, a walkthrough area and the dragons layer down below. So it was unusual in that it was something I was very passionate about doing, and I knew I could do it, but I couldn't believe I was doing it while I was doing it. And and then it became very challenging when it was handed over to a third party, because it started to drift a little bit. And so I became, I had to become a little bit aggressive in beating it back to its intended form, if you will.
Right.
But through all of that, and there were so many people involved with it, my deal was to keep the form of it lovely and beautiful and unique and French, but without being a copy of a French castle, or even a specific French region. So like the one at Walt Disney World, which is beautiful, is a Loire Valley, very specifically a French Loire Valley Renaissance era with some Gothic thrown in castle.
Right.
It's almost like a term paper, it's like, it's like you would get an A+. And so this had to be a little bit different. And so there were some folks who kind of drifted in that weren't like the main players on it, but that would, I like, Louis the 16th. So I'm going to make this Louis the 16th. And it's like, no, this isn't Louis the 16th. There was a little bit of, kind of just keeping it. That's what my thing was, just to keep that style and that profile of it, because the way I looked at it was that we had made a mistake in Tokyo by replicating one of the castles. And so now Tokyo Disneyland, in my opinion, then didn't have its own face, or it's, the castle is the face of the park.
Right. And
so it needs to have a unique, but Disney face. And so I just wanted to make sure that this was, fit that kind of vision of it being the face of Disneyland Paris, and being beautiful and working in silhouette, working as a logo, working in 360. So from every view. It's beautiful. And that's where I kind of kept, that's where I rode herd, if you will. And then there were other people that took on little elements of it, like Skip Lang and others were, kind of the shepherds of the Dragon's Lair. And Lynn Itamura, interior designer, had the Merlin shop, and David Brickey had the Holiday shop. And so, different folks had different aspects of it that made it even better.
Right. It's definitely a common thing with all the attractions. There are so many people working on them, and you get lots of great ideas from different sources and people with different skill sets and talents, and can contribute all kinds of ideas to these projects. And, you're talking a little bit about how you thought about the development of the castle and the design of it. And it has me thinking about process, because I feel like, especially when you have to conceptualize something new, it can be challenging to have truly a blank slate, when I'm sure that there are some ideas that are presented as must-haves, or it should look somewhat like this or be inspired by this. But I guess my question is, where do you draw some of the inspiration in the very early concepts for a new attraction or a new park? Like, where do you get some of that, or what's your process for drawing inspiration early on?
For any attraction?
Any attraction. If you have a specific one in mind as a good example, that's great. But just
the Imagineering has always had a great library, a great information resource center that goes back to, even the Walt Disney Studio had one back in the 30s at Hyperion, and then it was moved to Burbank, and it got even bigger.
Right.
And then when Imagineering moved from the studio to Glendale in 1961, they established their own small library there. And so it's always been an important part of any of the design. And in fact, all the books are still there that were touched and rifled through by Herb Ryman and Bill Martin and
That's
all these guys.
Cool. Yeah.
And so, sometimes you can find the origin of the design in some of these books.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it was an excellent library. I remember on Epcot checking out many books for the Imagination Pavilion. And one of them, I took down the name, and I purchased not long ago on eBay, because it was a book that was like done in the 50s, I think, or 60s, but it was imaginative architecture, because we were trying to figure out what the building, what do you build to represent imagination?
Right.
One person's imagination, is not the other person's. So
exactly.
So I was, scribbling up some ideas that I was seeing in some of these books. And eventually, I think it was Dan Guzet who came up with these truncated silver halide crystals. But I was working on some crystal ideas and a couple other people. It was similar in some ways to, I guess, what happened years later on the castle. I never kind of realized the parallel.
Right.
There were multiple people working on ideas for what the building would look like. And when Dan did his little, quick sketch, that was it. It was so like, that's perfect. And then I ended up being the de facto architect on it. I'm not an architect, but we were short of architects on that job, because Journey into Imagination was a last minute ad. So all the architects were deep in their projects. So, we needed to build a model for presentation purposes. And so the model builders needed some drawings. And so, and also someone needed to fit all of the ideas into a building and the ride layout and everything. So I kind of became the de facto architect until one came along a few months later. So I did all the initial geometry on those crystals and how they would fit together, and how we could fit something inside of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's definitely it was one of my favorite attractions growing up. I still enjoy the current version. It's not quite the same as it was, and there's a lot of pieces that have been taken out of it. But I still I enjoy the spirit of that attraction more than anything else. And Figment's a blast.
He's great.
Yeah. One of the concepts I definitely wanted to talk about, because it led to one of my favorite attractions, was if I've heard the story correctly, you were thinking of synchronized sound on coasters long before there was synchronized sound on coasters. So, how did that, I guess, idea come to you, and how did you help to bring it from this idea into a reality?
It started, the germ of the idea started when I was driving back and forth from my home to Disneyland. When I got a car, I was 16 years old. I got a tape deck, and I would, play different music. And I was, into the bands at the time too. So I noticed that certain parts of the journey from my home, which was in Newport Beach, to Disneyland, I was about a 20-minute drive. And sometimes what you were listening to, or what I was listening to on the tape, would correspond with some moment that would reveal something, probably something very, ordinary. Although there was one stretch on Jamboree Road where you would reach the top and then you'd see the harbor and the ocean. So I began timing the music to see if I could, and I'd be using like the band Styx or Yellow or, I can't remember them all now. I still have all the tapes. And so then when I started, when I moved to Florida for Epcot, I was there for a year and I started doing the same thing there. And I would do it with some of my friends, and I go, okay, wait, and whether we were on property or whether we were, going out to Cocoa Beach or something. And it was something that was always in my head. And so then when I got back to California, I started putting tapes together for Space Mountain. So I created you had to create multiple timing charts for it, because there was a variable of about 20 seconds or maybe more of trip time, depending on the weight of the vehicle, the time of day, the humidity, all of these things, the heat of the wheels, so all of these things either make a really fast rocket or a really slow rocket. So I came up with these tapes that used both popular music of the time and also John Williams scores and The Black Hole also. And,
awesome.
And I timed them out, and I knew like an empty morning rocket is going to be slow. A full evening rocket is going to be fast. So I had a fast tape and a slow tape. And I had a mixing board so that I could crossfade the music. And I came up with about, I don't know how many I demoed. I probably came up with about 10, but I demoed maybe 3 or 4 of them. And by this time I was doing my time at Disneyland in the WDI office at Disneyland, SQS, Show Quality Standards. And I was working for Kim Irvine at the time, just doing kind of the daily, design challenges that would come up every week at the park. And so sometimes before work, I would go into Space Mountain when they had just started cycling the vehicles, or after work, I'd go over there. And the ride operators were accommodating. So they knew that I was working on this experiment, and they'd let me ride around empty rockets before the guests were there. So I demoed them to several important people, and they all liked it. There was one that didn't like it, but and you never know. It's one of these things where you just would never predict. It's like people who get scared of things.
Yeah.
Really? The Rock is scared of spiders. It's that kind of thing. So I was kind of surprised that he thought it was it overloaded him. He said he was over stimulated, but everyone else really liked the idea. And then it just kind of sat there for a while because the challenge was the technology wasn't there to do the elastic kind of timing that you needed to make it. You want the cymbals to go off when you reach the bottom of the drop, or you want the sense of anticipation as you're going up the lift, and then as it reveals something, there's a crescendo. So this is all just going back to Steamboat Willie, right?
Right.
You want the right sound to hit at the right moment, and so the technology wasn't quite there yet. Plus, I don't know if the desire was quite. Everyone thought it was a neat idea, but it sounds expensive and technically challenging. So it kind of just floated there for a while. And then I think when we did Disneyland Paris, we had an added capacity program right after we opened that. And so Space Mountain was coming. And so was, but we thought we would test the idea out first on Casey Jr. Circus Train because it was a very predictable, it was a power coaster that meant that it's electrically driven versus gravity driven. So there wasn't variable in the timing of it. So,
right.
And I think at the same time, Ed Sato had Disneyland for a while. He was the art director, one of the art directors down at Disneyland. And so he wanted to do this too. So I think it all kind of like, okay, Disneyland wants to do it. Disneyland Paris wants to do it. We can test it out on Casey Jr. out there. And so Eddie got Dick Dale, and I found a guy, Steve Bramson, I think, did the score for Space Mountain for Tim Delaney. And that's where it was born. But I had an idea to do, always had this idea of doing a rock and roller coaster, going back to my rock and roll days, if you would call it that. And so, I was also pitching that. And there was very little interest in it until, I think Universal announced that they were going to do some kind of big similar thing. I think I can't remember what, or maybe it was just to go up against Islands of Adventure. But they needed something fast and big and e-ticket, but not too expensive. And so I pitched it, and they took it, and I didn't follow it through. That became one of Kathy Mangum and Paul Osterhout's baby once I pitched it. I pitched it over to them. I was still involved. I went out and we met Aerosmith and all of that.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. But finally the rock and roller coaster was accepted as a legitimate idea. Like 3 years earlier, it's like Disney is not rock and roll. It's not part of our brand, attributes.
Right. Meanwhile, it's still existing 22 years later and just about the same form it started in with the same band. And it's just as thrilling as it was. And I think that there are so many kids who were introduced to Aerosmith because of Rock and Roller Coaster.
Yeah, right.
So
exactly.
it's a great coaster. And nowadays it just is expected that when you have an attraction, you're going to have a score of some kind that goes with it, whether it's a coaster or a perfectly timed attraction.
Right. I mean, Disney has been all about music and motion since the beginning of the company, since Steamboat Willie.
Yeah. That's a great analogy, actually. Flowers
and trees and Fantasia. It's always been about the synchronization of sound, music, and motion.
Yeah, and you helped do it for Disney attractions. What Walt helped do for animation, so it's nothing to sneeze at. It's definitely a big accomplishment. Just to point out a couple of other projects. One of the other big ones was working on Hong Kong Disneyland, and I feel like that was probably like Disneyland Paris or Euro Disney at the time had its challenges of being an international park, and of course Tokyo Disneyland as well. You took on, I think, a bigger role for Hong Kong Disneyland. What was it any more challenging, or I should say, what were some of the challenges of bringing Disney to Hong Kong?
Well, I think Hong Kong is kind of a smaller region than any place we've ever built a park before in terms of the income qualified population that's within a certain prescribed radius. So it was, and also it was originally intended not even as a Disneyland. So much like the studio project in Paris, which also started off not intending to be a full day park, somehow ended up being a full day park. And I think it was the same with Hong Kong Disneyland. There had been some experiments with, what was it called? Joe Lancicero worked on this really cool idea that went out there. It was a traveling show, and it was extremely popular. And that kind of proved the popularity of Disney entertainment out there. And so they were looking at building something that was not quite a Disneyland, but it was bigger than an RD&E. And I wasn't working on it. I was, working on other projects at the time. So another team started that project, and they did such a good job that it became, well, why don't we just call it Disneyland? It has kind of an Adventureland area and kind of a Fantasyland area and kind of a castle. And so we should just, call it Disneyland.
Right.
But, the challenge was that only 5 or 6 million people would come the first year or so. And so this is where I had kind of disagreements, with the industrial engineering side of the company, which said, well, then you only do, X number of attractions and people will only be there for X number of hours. And it's like, whoa, this, we're talking about a really, kind of a small park here.
Right.
And I think people would be expecting something. Maybe they're not expecting, because who knows what they're expecting, the local audience out there, if they haven't ever been to Disneyland before. But in my opinion, Disneyland's partly successful because when you leave the gate, you only saw a percentage of it. You didn't see the whole thing.
Right.
I have to come back and see more. And my feet are tired, And that wasn't, I had a hunch that may not be the case on opening day, and it wasn't the case. It was every square inch of the park was beautiful and well done. There just wasn't enough of it. And so it was about a 4 or 5 hour park to see everything, and your feet weren't tired at the end of it. And you could say, I pretty much saw the whole thing. And that's a business model. I hope, I don't think it ever will be repeated, but it was a good lesson, I think.
Yeah. There are definitely lessons in Disney history to be learned.
But it was fun to work on with a really great team, and everything came out beautiful on it. I mean, it was just a beautiful park to walk around. The local hires that we hired for it were enthusiastic. The local creative team was very good. You couldn't really ask for a better scenario other than just more money. And we did, I remember we went back a couple of times, and this was when Pressler was in charge of theme parks, and he gave us the money to make it bigger. So you can imagine, how, unbig it was before that. And I think, and then when Jay Rizzullo came on board, he also threw in more money. I think everyone saw, obviously, that this park needed more money. But, I don't think it came quick enough.
Right.
And certainly it's grown now to a full day, a truly right-sized full day park with many, many different things to do. And still every square inch of it is beautiful.
Yeah, it's still a gorgeous park. I love, as I mentioned earlier, the updates they made to the castle. It's just a lot of great attractions to enjoy there, unique attractions to enjoy too. So it's still an amazing park. But I know it had a rough start compared to some of the others, or at least a smaller budget to start with.
Right.
I guess a kind of not so much a philosophical question, but a conceptual question. There are so many attractions at Disney that are what I would call originals, things like Rock and Roller Coaster, where they're just they come obviously from some inspiration, but they're unique to the parks. You can't find, you can go to an Aerosmith concert, but you're not going to find a movie based on Rock and Roller Coaster. And then there are attractions or lands like Cars Land that are based on existing properties. And I know Cars Land started as another idea at first that was more of a general idea, and then moved into, once Cars came out, being focused on Pixar's film. But do you find that it's more enjoyable to conceptualize something that is completely unique versus something that is based on a film? Or what are some of the differences or challenges that are unique to either one of those?
No, I don't think it's different. And I mean, I remember, when I first started at WED, there was a frustration that we couldn't do IP,
right?
Because there were so many things either in the works or recently done, or classics from the past that seemed like they would make great attractions. So naturally, you think of all of the different things you could do with existing. I always thought some kind of a head trippy Fantasia thing would be really cool.
That would be cool.
But selecting very carefully, cherry picking the most exciting and enthralling moments from it. And I think I did a proposal for that one time. And there was always this great expectation that the next film was going to be the one that we could do that with, Tron or The Black Hole, or before I started there, it was Island at the Top of the World. And he just really couldn't get any interest. Even if the film did relatively well, it still didn't seem like he could get a lot of interest.
Right.
And so we're like, please come up with a film that is extremely popular that we can base an attraction off of. And, I think a Tron attraction would have been great, despite the fact that, it still did well. It just wasn't was not a blockbuster, but people respond to well-done attractions more than they respond to the IP, in my opinion. So
I agree.
If you took IP and squandered it and didn't do a good job, that's not as good as doing, taking a generic idea or a non-IP idea and doing a really great job with it. So I always think it's better to take a bad idea and make it great than vice versa. And if you want, like an example of a bad idea that's great is Ratatouille. Can you imagine that pitch of the film I'm talking about? Pitching the film about a rat that becomes a chef. It sounds like a bad idea, but it's a great film, of course. So it's all in the execution. I think that's all.
Great way to put it.
I don't care whether it's IP or not IP. Now, I do happen to think there's too much emphasis on it, and it would be nice to see more original ideas. But when you're working on it, I think that the challenge is the same. Is to come up with you're kind of like a movie director, and the challenge is to come up with the right simple storyline, through line that makes it easily understandable, so it doesn't have to be explained through narration, and creating surprises and goosebump moments, when you turn the corner and something is revealed or something is concealed. And, I think Roger Rabbit is a great example of that. I didn't work on that. That's Joe Lancicero's, but it's such a great dark ride attraction, and it perfectly takes that content. And, I think if you're laying that attraction out and working out all the scenes, I think that was probably Robert Coltrane who did that for along with Joe. You're thinking about the excitement and the surprises and the lighting and the special effects. And at that point, it doesn't matter whether it's an original idea or whether it's, IP.
Yeah, that it makes sense. I think that your point about execution is probably the right way to think about it, because regardless of if it's based on IP or not, it's all about the experience of really what the attraction is. And there are so many examples of some of my favorite attractions are based on IP. Star Wars Rise of the Resistance is my new favorite. And that's
Yeah.
clearly based completely on the Star Wars universe. Right. It's like being in a Star Wars movie.
Right.
As a conduit to talking about the sort of my wrap up questions here, because I want to talk about what you've been doing since. I feel like you're in that, again, position of being an Imagineer by trade, and also a historian and someone who appreciates all the work that goes into, and you sort of, like me, study all the specific details and everything that went into it. So rather than, I was thinking of asking what your favorite attraction you didn't work on was, but I'm going to ask it a different way. If you could work on any attraction that exists now that you didn't get the chance to work on, what would be the attraction you're like, I wish I could have worked on this one?
Oh, wow. I know there's several, because in my head, what you just said rings true. Probably Phantom Manor in Paris, or Hong Kong's, the name just slipped away
Mystic
from
Manor.
me. Thank you.
Yep. They're so similar.
I saying it the other day. And, those two, I mean, I would always have liked to have worked on a Haunted Mansion in one way or another, or Tower of Terror. I actually worked on some proposals for upgrades and updates to Tower of Terror. And I think one of the ideas was adopted, but I had a whole kind of bag of tricks that I had proposed at one time. But yeah, one of the any of the Haunted an update to the Haunted Mansion, Phantom Manor, Mystic Manor, any of those I would have loved to have worked on. Those are the ones that come to mind, I guess, first.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And perhaps they'll need one in the future. I don't think Shanghai has one. Yeah, so that would be the next park to potentially get one. Maybe if they can bring you back on as a consultant for a project like that, that would be a dream come true. So, like I said, it was kind of leading into my wrap up questions here, because since you, even when you were in Imagineering, you were always asking questions and trying to learn more about the parks and how they were developed and who worked on the attractions. And I know that you're working on a book as well. So I'd love if you could tease out a little bit about what the book is, what you've maybe done so far, and if we have a potential date that it might be released, but I know that's probably not the case yet.
The story of this book is longer than the story that because I didn't set out to become a book writer. But I thought in my last few years at WDI, I was doing some work that was related to its history and its legacy, and also, how best, what are examples of our best work and our best processes. And I thought, I should do a book like The Art of Animation, like the Bob Thomas Art of Animation book that I grew up with.
Right.
That inspired me. Before I wanted to be an Imagineer, I wanted to be in animation. And that book had so many insights to it. It was, the perfect primer for understanding the art and the process of animation. So I thought a companion, The Art of Imagineering, would make sense. And I actually created a keynote presentation that I gave several times there. And I thought this would make a great book. But I also realized the challenges of doing that book, because what do you talk about? What do you not talk about? You're going to have a million editors on that book. So I want to do that book. There's some people that want me to do that book. But I don't think I'm going to start out with that book. I would like to do a book on the archaeology of Disneyland, because I've just, in the course of doing my job over 35 years at Imagineering, I've learned and collected so many things that are interesting to me that I don't think would have been interesting to people 20 years ago or 25 years ago. In fact, when I first started talking about doing this, people said, well, that's, you and 10 other people. And I go, I know, right? But then I mentioned it in a meeting one day with some of the publishing folks, and they said, that's a great idea. This was not long ago.
Right.
And, why don't you forward us something? And so I started working on that. And at the same time, I retired. So I thought this works out perfectly.
Yeah.
But in the course of doing that, starting research up for that book, I started uncovering interesting morsels of information, mostly regarding people I had never heard of, Imagineers I had never heard of before, and started meeting Imagineers that I had never heard of before, like Tanya McKnight. And I remember having lunch with Glenn Derflinger and asking him questions about who did, what certain things. And he easily could have taken credit himself because he was the job captain of those particular jobs, and his name is on all of the blueprints, all of the drawings. And he would mention a name, and I'm like, really, I've never heard that name. And then I would take that name to Tanya, and she'd tell me something about it. Okay, that's interesting. That'll make a good book too. But let me get into this archaeology thing. And the archaeology book got delayed a year or two. And in the meantime, I'm still digging around, deep diving, as you will, and coming up with more and more names and interesting things and projects I had never heard of. And so I pitched the idea to the archives and to the Hyperion Historical Alliance, which is an outside group, but that gets some cooperation and support from the archives. And they liked the idea of doing a deep dive on the early days of Imagineering. Basically, it started off as the Forgotten Imagineers, which is a terrible name, but it was going to be focused on what I thought would be 60 people.
Yeah.
And so as I did my research and got deeper and deeper, it was significantly more than 60 people, and realized I'm not going to be able to get bios or information on every one of these people. So we'll have some other, fun things in the book. Lots of revelations about where the work took place. A lot of the early Imagineers, most of them came from the studios. They didn't all come from 20th Century Fox. And but they were almost all involved in one way or another in film, even if they were licensed architects. So most of these people went on to do something that you've heard of.
Yep.
In their post-Disney career, post-WED career. And so there's, a few Academy Award winners and Emmy Award winners and other award, architectural recognition award winners. And so the people are interesting, the places are interesting, where the work took place, when the work took place. So all sorts of things that have been completely forgotten, mock-ups that have been forgotten about, that I have found photographs of, not even at the archives. By the way, there's great collections. If you know where to look, there's stuff everywhere. And so I, did a lot of aerial reconnaissance using the collections of the aerial photography libraries of some of the universities to discover, what's this interesting thing in the back lot of the Disney studio? And and then you find out what it is, and it's very interesting. And you go to Bob Gurr, and it's like, I don't remember that. And so, you get some new stories. Let me put it that way.
That's very cool.
So I'm in the process of sort of finishing it up, but I'll submit a first draft, I think, fairly soon, within the next couple months. I'm finishing up a mock-up right now, but there's a few people I'm still trying to track down. And also I'm going to be very fastidious about fact checking on it. So, and also distinguishing between conjecture and fact. So here's something I'm not sure about, but it looks like this was the case, versus I know this is the case because it's backed up by photographs, memos. And most of the book is corroborated using 3 or 4 different sources. So there isn't like a single source that I'm basing all of this on.
That's great. I think that's an excellent way to approach it. It's almost like it's a very scientific approach to the subject. And there is so much that's out there that's conjecture versus
I realized too late that I probably would have been a good candidate for the CIA or the FBI. Now the book only goes up to 1961. There will be a second volume, hopefully, that goes to 71, and then that's it. I'm not doing any more beyond that because, and I've got most of it. Actually, I have most of the material for most of it all the way through 71, but it was broken up in half so that the first half can get out sooner and create interest. And I'm hoping around a year, it might be out. I don't know what kind of, how long the editing process or the review process will take place, because it still has to be reviewed by Disney Legal and all of that.
Of course.
But it's pretty far along now. And just some of this fact checking, I think, is going to dribble on, for a little while. If it takes too long, then I'll just take that piece out. Part of the book is, I can't tell the full story on all of these people or all of these anecdotes. So it's for other sleuths. It's a starting point for other sleuths to deep dive, because all of these ancestry type, sites are helpful. A lot of these people, though, don't show up on those sites. So require, contacting relatives and all of that. That's not my strong point. Other people love doing that. And so there's going to be much more that could be dug up after the book is released, but that's the interactive part.
Well, that's great. That's really awesome. A year is not too far off. If it's, we won't hold you to it, but that's definitely encouraging to know it's not too far away.
Also, you never know, someone could kibosh it too. So
let's hope not. It sounds like it's a great idea.
It'll always exist as in some form, and it'll always be a research piece that I'm sure the archives will love to have.
Oh, yes, 100%.
I don't foresee any problems, but I have to be realistic in this world. You never know if management changes, whatever could change things.
That's very true. Well, hopefully it'll all go through okay. So then my last question is just, where can people follow you to know when the book is up, and then see anything else you might publish that's interesting that you come across in your research or just in your Disney fandom?
Strangely and accidentally, I'm on Twitter, but I enjoy it. I've met a lot of interesting people and learned a lot of things. I'm on Twitter as Tom K. Morris, and I'm also on Instagram. And so that's how you can get a hold of me, or follow me anyway. I don't know how successful you'll be now getting a hold of me. Just in the last few weeks, all of a sudden now, I find myself really busier than probably when I was working. It's not just the book, it's so many other things, but I've also maybe overcommitted myself. And I have a lot of people. There's actually a lot of people I need to interview. So I'm falling behind in my calling the family, the sons, the daughters, the nieces and nephews of these Imagineers.
Yeah.
And the list is getting longer, and I need to get back on that.
Well, I will absolutely make sure to link to those places so listeners can follow you. And I'll just say that the follow part, maybe not might not be as successful contacting you, but at least to see what you're posting, and to keep in touch on Twitter and on Instagram. But Tom, I feel like we could have spoken for a lot longer. I had so many questions, just like you have so many questions about Disney, but it was great to chat with you for this bit of time. And it was a real pleasure. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, you're very welcome. And maybe we can do it again in the future.
I hope so. That'd be great. with that, we close out episode 101 of the Imagineer podcast. I want to give a very sincere thanks to Tom for taking the time to chat with me about his experiences at Walt Disney Imagineering and, of course, the projects he's been working on since. I'm so excited to see his book or his couple of books come to life and anything else that he might develop in the future. So I want to, of course, turn the conversation over to you and hear which of Tom's many ideas and contributions to the Walt Disney Company and, of course, to Imagineering in particular is your favorite. You can send me your answers and feedback in so many different ways. I would encourage you to follow us on social media at Imagineer Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Plus, you can reach out to me on Twitter at Imagineer News, and you can join our Facebook group, The Imagination, also called the Imagineer Podcast Disney Fan Community, to chat with me and others about this topic and all things Disney. So you can click that you would like to join there, and of course, as soon as I see that request come through, I'll accept you and welcome you into our group. You can also send me an email at matt@imagineerpodcast.com. And if you haven't yet already subscribed to the show, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, Podbean, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or any other podcast app, so that you are the first to know when new podcast episodes become available. If you haven't yet taken the opportunity to rate and review the show, and of course, if you love the show, it's one of the best things you can do for us, especially if you leave us a rating and a review in the Apple Podcast Store. It takes about 10 seconds to leave a rating, and depending on how lengthy your review is, of course, it could take a minute or a couple of minutes to write a review. And I do read each and every review that comes through Apple Podcasts. I'll often share them out to my Instagram and Facebook stories, and I'm so thankful to those of you who have rated and reviewed the show in the past. The best thing you can do for the show is very simple, and that's to share it. Whether you share out this episode with Tom K. Morris, or your favorite episode of the show, or you share out the podcast as a whole, or a post on social media, or anything you do, even just talking with your friends about Imagineer Podcast can do a lot to help this community out, to build our community of optimistic, friendly, and family-friendly Disney fans. It's so heartwarming to see so many of you gravitating towards this community and staying positive and spreading that optimism about Disney. So I am so thankful to you and encourage you to continue to share the show whenever you get the chance. If you'd like to take your love of Imagineer Podcast to the next level, be sure to look into our Patreon group, which you can find over at patreon.com/Imagineer Podcast. You'll find a link in the podcast description and at ImagineerPodcast.com. And Patreon, by the way, is spelled Patreon. Patreon is a way that you can help to support the show financially, and in return get exclusive content, benefits, and perks. Things like access to a private Facebook group, access to my close friends list on Instagram, where I'll frequently post bonus polls, bonus Disney quizzes, and other bonus stories. You can get early access to every podcast episode, bonus podcast episodes. I've been doing also a daily Disney music loop where I link you to a music loop of the day, something I might be listening to that gets me back into my Disney state of mind and helps me to get over my Disney blues when I'm not at the parks. So you can learn more about those perks and anything else that's available. Of course, these terms and conditions and the perks that are available are subject to change, but you can check it all out again by going to patreon.com/Imagineer Podcast. You can find the link in the show description or at ImagineerPodcast.com. I would also encourage you to check out our partners. First, take a look at The Kingdom Insider over at thekingdominsider.com and The Kingdom Insider on all social media platforms to get the latest news about what's happening at Walt Disney World and Disneyland and all other Disney destinations. Plus, you can also get some tips about ways to maximize your next vacation, ways to bring the magic of Disney into your own home, and so much more. So again, check them out at thekingdominsider.com or The Kingdom Insider on your favorite social media channel. Plus, the next time you're ready to book a vacation to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, Disney Cruise Line, Aulani, Adventures by Disney, or any other Disney destination, be sure to look into our travel partner, Academy Travel, and for Disney in particular, Mickey Vacations by Academy Travel, because they have been doing this for over 25 years and they are diamond earmarked, which is the highest level of distinction that Disney awards travel agencies. That's thanks to their level of service and how much they can help you to plan out your next trip. And the best thing is that it's all at no additional charge to you, so they can take out the time and the hassle of planning all those steps for your next Disney vacation. And especially if this is your first time going to Disney or your first time returning to the magic in a while, they can really help to alleviate a lot of that guesswork and walk you through some of the steps to make the most of your next Disney trip. They can even help you to save money because they're aware of all the discounts that are available. You can request a free quote from them by clicking on any of the travel links in the description of this podcast episode, or go to imagineerpodcast.com. Click on the travel drop-down and select your destination. That will take you to a form to fill out. Once you fill out that form, they will get back to you again with a free quote. There's no obligation to continue from there, but just in case you're curious, they can help to start your vacation planning process. Last but not least, as always, I want to encourage you to go after your hopes, your dreams, your goals, whatever they might be. Take that first step today to make that dream a reality. It definitely takes some hard work, but it is all worth it, and you'll find that the journey itself is one of the most rewarding aspects of working towards your dreams and your goals. And remember, as always, that inspiring quote from Horizons: if you can dream it, you can do it. Thank you so much for listening to the show, and we'll see you again in a future episode of the Imagineer Podcast.
Wait a minute. I love that idea. How about some backstage passes?
Yeah.
No. Come on.
Yeah, come on.
Make it happen. Give me some.
Okay, I'll make it happen.
All right,
now
all
get
right.
out of here.
We got it. We
I
got
hate
it.
all of you.
See ya. Have a nice ride.
Hi, Sal, it's me. Listen, I'm gonna need a bigger car. Make it a stretch. One. In fact, make it a super stretch. Great. Excuse me. Okay, folks. Look, the show is all the way across town, but I got you a really fast car.
To the car.
Okay, wait, it's out in the alley. Hey, guys. Guys.